Well, now that Linda's here, we can start the meeting, so. My watch says 6 o'clock. You're right on time. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Roll call.
Manson, Templin,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Huggins, Milburn,
Yes.
Maddock,
Yes.
Schultz.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, it looks like Commissioner Manson is absent today.
Thank you. Item 3A, general business, approve the planning commission agenda. Any additions or corrections to make to the agenda at this time?
Make a motion we approve the planning commission agenda as written.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Agenda's approved. Item 3B, approve the minutes of the planning commission meeting held May 28th, 2024. Changes, additions, or corrections to the minutes?
I make a motion that we accept the minutes as proposed, as subjected.
Second.
Moved and seconded and third. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, minutes are approved. Item 3C, disclosure of conflicts of interest. Anyone have anything to disclose with regard to what's on the agenda tonight?
Chairman Timlin, I'll have to excuse myself from item 5C.
5C,
Yes.
okay. Anyone else? All right, item 3D, disclosure of outside communications regarding commission business. Taking any phone calls on the items on the agenda tonight? Meet anybody at Harps you need to talk about?
Did you?
All right. That being said, I believe we're ready for new business. Oh, no, I'm sorry, for call to public. Meetings, members of the public who wish to address the planning commission regarding items not on the agenda may do so. Presentations for information purposes only. No action will be taken, and there's a 4-minute time limit. Is there anyone here who would like to address the planning commission regarding matters not on the agenda tonight? Seeing no one leap to the podium. Anyone online?
There is one person online, that might be Patrick. Yes, that's me. Thank you, guys.
Okay. So I will close the call to the public. Item 5A, public hearing for a special use permit for concrete batch plant near Panasonic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. How are you? I'm glad we're all gathered here for our 3 public hearings we've got going on tonight. The first of which we talked about last time was a public hearing for the concrete batch plant for Geiger Concrete. I did update some of the information, but not a lot has changed. As you recall, last time it was just a discussion item to see what kind of comments planning commissioners may have on the item. I think we covered quite a bit of ground last time, so there isn't a whole lot to change. The county did update their aerial photos so you can see where the Geiger batch plant is now relative to the Panasonic construction, also to 103rd Street where it's at on Astor Parkway, and then also I noted that the nearest residential complex, so to speak, is Clearview City. So with all the construction going on, really there isn't much that our standard procedure would require them to be completing. We have talked about the donation for some of the road maintenance that the city will be doing basically from the portion from the extended completion of Astor Parkway, which KDOT is completing. Otherwise, it looks like a pretty straightforward application. It is a abbreviated one. The batch plant that's on site is temporary, and it is there primarily for Panasonic, but as we talked about last time, there is capacity available for Geiger Concrete to sell within DeSoto. It certainly is a benefit to the city to have something like this. I did go through, as we typically do with all special use permits and rezonings, is the golden criteria. All these items are generally positive. Didn't see anything that really jumped out at me as far as something that needed to be focused on as any kind of negative or procedural item that I think needed to be dived into a little bit deeper. So with that, I'll stand for any questions you may have. Representatives from Geiger Concrete are here, Todd Geiger and Chad Tenpenny. So, Mr. Chairman, I will, as I said, I'll stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Brad. Any questions for Brad?
I have one that I thought of last time, and I didn't voice it, and so I'm going to ask now. With the location of them being where they are and new businesses going to be located in Astra Parkway or Astra, does that give them a competitive edge on pricing since most people have to pay for mileage and things? How's that
I
gonna
guess I
work?
would have to defer to the applicant on the pricing, and I would assume so, but, I mean, as they pointed out in their last meeting, there is no concrete batch plant nearby DeSoto, so certainly it would give them a pricing advantage over coming from Lawrence or Lenexa, Olathe.
Well,
Oh, sure, Chad, if you'd
My
like.
name's Chad Tenpenny, representing.
With you in mind.
Yes, Chad Tenpenny, General Counsel, Geiger Ready Mix. Yes, distance is a big deal and time is a big deal in the concrete delivery process. Yes, it could possibly give us a competitive advantage, but yes, that is something we would hope to share with our customers, building houses and roads, and so would share that with our customers as well.
okay, so you would pass that savings on to your customers then? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, certainly that would be a factor in the bidding process, rather than the nearest plant's 25 minutes away in Olathe. So having something here in the DeSoto community would make the construction process theoretically, cheaper, more cost-effective for everyone.
Okay, which is wonderful, but I'm wondering how does that factor in with your competition? You know, they've got to pay for that, anybody else? I mean, I appreciate what you're doing, but at the same time, it seems like it gives an unfair advantage to you guys because you're going to be able to sell it cheaper than anybody else. So I'm not sure how that's going to be fair to the other concrete companies. I don't know whether that should be anything we could think about or not, but it seems like that's kind of,
Well, I'll chime in here. I don't know that that's necessarily our role,
okay.
but, if you're talking about an advantage, kind of hard to argue that it's not an advantage, whether it's an unfair advantage. I don't know that there's anything we're doing to create an unfairness.
Okay.
This is the use of an existing property, and if I suppose if a competitor wanted to put up a batch plant there too, we'd have to look at it just like we were looking at theirs.
Okay.
So I don't know that there's anything having to do with unfairness about it, but I think it's just business.
Okay. All right, thank you. for
Well
coming.
said, Mr. Chairman. Thank
I
you.
don't know if I'm right.
Yeah.
but-
Second that motion.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? The applicant, well, we've got Chad standing up there, so. Thank you.
Thank you.
This matter is a public hearing, so anyone from the public who would like to be heard on this matter, please address the podium, give us your name and address, and tell us what's on your mind. I'm not going to ask Patrick because he's not a taxpayer, so.
Not here anyway.
Although I don't think that's the criteria.
Yeah.
Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. The matter is before the planning commission. Discussion?
In the recommendation from staff, the $10,000 of road maintenance, is that new, or did I just miss that last time? Because I know Justin brought up some stuff.
Thank you for that question. I don't know that it was in the staff report last time. It's not something I particularly emphasized, but it was part of the discussions, negotiations we had with Geiger Concrete, and Joe and I talked about what we thought was an appropriate level, and then also looking at some of the other special use permits, particularly the quarry, and then also the sand plant. That's right, similar kind of annual contribution that both companies make.
I have a couple discussion questions. How do we feel about 3 years? Are we comfortable with that?
Oh, I'm assuming they picked that timeline because it lines up with when Panasonic substantially is supposed to be completed.
Next year.
Yes, I would note that it'd be very difficult to operate this mobile batch plant once the Panasonic construction ends due to utility arrangements we have with the contractors. Essentially, when the Panasonic construction closes, we'll probably find another use for this facility. Would also note, at the same time, we are in search of a more permanent location on the Astra site where we could put a permanent plant, and we absolutely understand that the site plan process for a permanent location would be more thorough and have more requirements, and we're absolutely prepared and committed to go through that process.
Thank you.
I seem to be in agreement with staff's recommendation and comments, so, and I do like the 3-year time period for the temporary. So I think I'd be
Okay.
for a recommendation.
I've got one question for Brad. The report says that the fee has been discussed or suggested.
Yeah,
When will
we've,
that be codified? When will the decision be made?
well, we have gotten, I guess, an oral. I mean, I spoke with Chad several times, and it was agreed to that amount. So now it's a recommendation in the staff report of the planning commission. Ultimately, it goes to city council for that final decision. So,
I'm assuming it would be embodied in the actual permit itself, right?
yeah.
So it would be a legal requirement.
Okay. That's all I had.
Any further discussion, motions?
Make a motion that we approve item 5A as written for the discussion for a special use permit for the concrete batch plant. And I think that sound right to you? Yeah?
Recommend approval with the recommendations.
Yes. Recommend approval with staff's recommendations. Thank you.
And a second?
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Templin,
Yes.
Milburn,
Yes.
Maddock,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes,
Huggins,
Yes.
Schultz.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving to item 5B, public hearing to discuss changes to our ordinances to allow for side yard setbacks in RO rural suburban zoning district for accessory buildings. Brad?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, this is a follow-up on what we talked about last meeting. You did ask a couple of questions about the side setback or the rear setback, which was the most concerning issue. And a lot of these requests go through Cameron, our building official, and I talked to him for quite a bit of time. But ultimately, it's really the side yard setback that seems to be the most difficult one to meet with the RO. So it sounded like when we talked last time, the planning commission had more concerns about reducing the side yard setback, but that's kind of the one that's the biggest problem. You can, in many cases, if you even look at some of these examples that I have, you can see if you just keep pushing it back, in a lot of ways, they'll fit, especially the Exhibit B, that 1,600 building, or 1,600 square foot building, would fit if it were farther back in the, or with the proposed setbacks, even with the 25 foot. So but it's also, it's terrain, it's the location of the house. There's just a lot of issues that certainly come into play on these things. So it's, really, as I see it, you've got really three options. You can go with our staff recommendation. You can recommend a different setback, or you can just leave it as is, and we'll take that forward, and we'll just keep doing business the way we've been doing business with these requests in the RO district, knowing that you're likely to get some spot rezonings here and there. I did also include the zoning map that shows the eastern part of DeSoto, and you can see that that's Exhibit D, where the R1 and the ROs are fairly interspersed. And really, when you drive through those areas, they really don't look any different, except the zoning district prohibits that 25-foot side yard setback and the 50-foot rear yard setback do create some issues. And so really, the other point that's in the staff report is the BZA, the few times that we've met, have kind of fallen towards saying, well, there isn't a lot of difference between the RO and the R1 as far as the land use itself, and have reduced the setbacks for RO. The other thing is when we have met with the BZA, and it's probably been over maybe 2 years since we've met last, but nobody's really complained too much. Most of the neighbors have always been pretty supportive of allowing for the accessory building to be a little bit closer. And I think part of that is in many cases, if they wanted to do something like that, they wanted to have that option open as well. So that's kind of where we're at with the staff recommendations. I think it would take a little bit of a burden off of us internally and not have to go through a rezoning process, which I think will be continually happening if we keep the same setbacks. But once again, this is a matter for the Planning Commission to make a recommendation to the City Council. So with that, I will stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Brad.
Hey, Brad, on Exhibit B, for example, would the city allow, that'd probably be the one that'd be the worst one for the question I'm gonna ask. Would they allow 2 driveway entrances? How does that get approved?
Well, typically we don't. In many cases, they would, in this instance, most of the residents, and it's really doesn't come up a lot because they're trying to save some money. So they'll just take something off and go around from their existing driveway. There probably are a few around DeSoto that have 2 entrances. In fact, I think there's actually some in Oak Country that have 2 entrances. Sometimes if they're on a corner lot, they'll take an entrance off of the side street, not their primary front, the secondary front, to get to the accessory building.
There's a few that have more than one entrance that never were approved.
Yes, they were
Think
just,
of a couple.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's a prohibition on more than one entrance for a local residential street. It's when if you're on a collector or an arterial, one that we've designated as it, then there would be a restriction. But I'm not sure that we limit. I don't think there's a restriction on that. I think practicalities, most people don't do it, but.
And if they do, one of them's gravel.
well, yeah, you can see in this Exhibit C, that location there, they've got 2 entrances.
So your recommendation is that we squeeze the rear by 20 feet and then the side by 10?
Correct.
Okay.
And the one thing also about the R1 is that setback fluctuates between 10 and 15 feet. So, granted, it's not much of a concession, but it would still keep the RO somewhat different from what could be happen in the R1.
Yeah, so R1's still 35 foot, but RO is 50 foot on the front. So no change there, and then you're taking down the side and the rear, basically.
Correct.
In the R1, what would cause the side yard to be 15 feet?
If it's greater than, it's 10% of the lot width not to exceed
15.
15 feet. So if you had a 200-foot wide lot, it would be a 15-foot side yard setback.
Okay, thank you.
Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't have any examples here where anybody had to be closer in the side yard than 20 feet, right? Because these variances all been basically from the back, right?
Well, I happen to live in R0, and my neighbor did a variance because he ran into the same problem. He was going to hit lateral lines if he landed his accessory building within the setbacks. So he asked me if I cared, and I said no. So he's got it 10 foot off his property line.
10 foot on the side yard. So there are examples of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are. I guess the ones I picked were, I mean, I didn't want to go back through the
I'm
whole history
25
of all of
feet
them.
off of the side yard, so between his and I's, we still got 35 feet between
Yeah,
the buildings.
yeah.
So,
Okay, if there are no more questions for Brad, then I'll open it up for a public hearing. Thank you, Brad. The matter is now before the planning commission in a public hearing. Anyone who would like to be heard on this matter, please approach the podium and give us your name and address. I'm assuming Patrick still doesn't want to speak? Okay. As no one is approaching the podium, I will close the public hearing. The matter is before the planning commission. Additional questions, discussion?
Yeah, so I think I would generally be in favor for this reduction, but I don't know if there's a language or something. I guess it was my next question, but I thought it'd be more for a discussion item. But on Exhibit C, I just don't know if I'm a big fan of if the accessory building, if they access it within the 15 feet, like you put paving between the building and the property line. So I think that would encroach a little bit on the neighbors. I don't know how we would say that in the code, but I guess I would be in favor for that reduction. Somehow we could say, we don't want to drive between the building and the property line. So that would be encroaching too much, I would think.
Well, drives and flat work, ground level or down, there's no setback
Oh, yeah, I understand.
today.
Yeah, I understand. But if we didn't have that reduction, and they put a drive within that quote setback, it wouldn't be as extreme.
Okay.
Like on the Exhibit C, I mean, literally, they paved right up to the property line.
Or over it, depending upon how you look at it.
So I think if I were to be that neighbor, I would be a little living in that zoning district.
That's a good point.
But other than that, I would be in favor of the reduction.
Well, I think one of the most compelling reasons to make the change is that the BZA is taking this apparently as a acceptable condition. And if it's something the city's going to be accepting, why not make it part of our policy? So I would
Well-
I would be in support of it.
There haven't been that many BZA things either. You know, they're rare. I'm on that committee, so there's very few. And it is a case-by-case situation. And we have had people come up and speak before, so.
Well, I don't know that the process of requiring people to rezone pockets of R1s and RO districts is a very good policy. Me, if there is something that we can agree with that's not going to be changing the general character of RO, I'm in favor of it. I think I have no problem with the rear setbacks because these are all largely, most of our RO development is kind of long and narrow, if anything. We have very few of them that are a lot of frontage with not very deep. So I don't think I have any real problem with the rear setback at all. The only question I have is whether the side setback's appropriate at 15 feet. I think, Charlie, you made a good point about that. It's like, well, the neighbor's gonna probably be 25, 30 feet off anyhow. So it's not like they're gonna be right next to each other. But I suppose you'd have that possibility. You have two people that put them right next to each other, and that would be something that would be an issue, I suppose.
You could be 30 feet as the code's written without having a variance, which is still a decent amount, but, a lot closer than what we have today.
Do we have limits on how large an accessory structure can be in ROs?
Yeah, yes, we do. It's based on lot size.
So they could be quite large.
Yeah, there are some people that have 5-acre lots that could, I don't remember the exact, but this 1,600 square feet is the largest you could have on a 1 acre. And it sort of ratios up from there, so, and there is a cap. But there are some fairly significant accessory buildings in DeSoto on like I said, lots that are 3, 4, 5 acres.
Do we allow?
But it's really not the bigger lots that are, they've got room for those things.
Yeah.
It's these 1.5, acre lots that is pointed out that the laterals are right smack dab in the middle. Don't like to go through that process of telling somebody got to move a lateral field, because then you get into some environmental issues. You don't want to have to just dig up something that's working, and it is something that we do regulate pretty closely here in DeSoto. So we've kind of conceded on moving the accessory building or granting a variance for somebody in these large district or large lot districts versus relocating a lateral field or something along those lines.
By the way, did the property owners know you picked this one?
No, they did not.
Just curious, because I happen to know these people. I didn't think they were putting a 1,600.
Oh, are they going to are they waiting to
I don't think they
submit their
are.
application for
I
an
don't think
accessory
they
building?
Okay.
If you wanted to see what it looks like, I can give you my address up here and we can pull it up to see what ones that sit alongside one another.
Next to the side yard?
Yeah. If you look at 30574 West 98, that'll give you an idea of what two accessory buildings look like right next to each other. One being, so there's my pool and shop, and then there's the neighbor's shop as well. So still a fair bit of distance between the two. I was lucky because my lateral lines are well outside of where I wanted to build, but his are right up on top of where that outbuilding was going to be.
So the guy on the left is the one who's got the tent?
Guy on the right. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So it's obviously a little bit dated, but yeah. So.
Okay, thank you.
But even in that picture, Mr. Chairman, you can see accessory buildings are something that people like to have, and I don't see there's going to be any kind of slowdown in permits for accessory buildings coming before, at least to the building, being turned into the building officials department.
Yeah. Do you don't have a street view of that, Mike?
no street view there. Did you know that?
I thought there was. I don't know.
I'm a little surprised.
Anyhow, that's what an example of accessory buildings look like together.
Google Maps will give you a street view.
One thing I might add on the example on Exhibit C, and Mike, I don't know if there's one that dropped down in the street level, but the train actually kind of slopes down from the house, and even with the setback of 25 feet, that accessory building, that new building that's up, it looks, I mean, you're kind of looking up at it, and the neighbors did question, like, is this right? It seems closer. I mean, you know, it's in the, I mean, it's right where it's supposed to be, but that corner it's fairly tall. And once again, that gets in a terrain issue. I mean, if it were a flat lot, it wouldn't be a big deal at all. But it's just, I mean, we always try to solve every problem, but when we talk about these items, and there's always some sort of little catch or something that isn't quite right. But I do agree with you, Mr. Chairman, about having these spot rezonings. Just isn't a good policy for us to pursue.
Thank you. Further discussion, recommendations, modifications, motions?
I certainly don't have a problem with it, obviously. But I might be slightly biased based on what I just showed you guys.
Yeah.
If this would alleviate having to rezone these little pockets, I would be in favor of that.
I mean, I really think the only issue we're talking about is whether the side yard reduction to 15 feet are we comfortable with that? I mean, I suppose we could propose any number you want to. We can make it 20, we can say leave it as 25 as it was. My guess is the difference between 15 and 20 is not gonna make a lot of difference.
Yeah. I'm comfortable with staff's recommendation.
So we're recommending staff present a text change to the code?
Correct, and this will go to the city council
Okay.
for final approval or a change in what they think the policy ought to be.
Further discussion or motion?
Make a motion to approve staff's text amendment recommendations, item 5B for the RO district, reducing the side setback to side setback to 15 feet and the rear setback to 30 feet.
Second.
Moved in second. Any further discussion? Roll call?
Pickens,
Yes.
Lane,
No.
Templin,
Yes.
Milburn,
Yes.
Maddock,
Yes.
Schultz.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Item 5C, public hearing on rezoning at 32855 Lexington Avenue. Commissioner Milburn will be excusing himself.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you said, this is a rezoning at 32855 Lexington Avenue. Actually, there are several tracks that are being rezoned tonight. As you can see, the light lines within the exhibit in your staff report, all of those are zoned R1. And as I understand, there's a purchase agreement between Mr. Baker and Brant Clark, who is the other applicant on this rezoning application, to consolidate them into one ownership. However, the zoning process is moving forward while that transaction is taking place. This is the site of the former DeSoto self-storage. It was a building that was vacant for quite some time. It was zoned R1. A little bit of history. I had several people interested in purchasing the structure, but because it had been abandoned for over a year, it would have required site plan, rezoning, all the things. They thought they could maybe buy it on the cheap and turn it back into a storage unit. And once it had been, its use had been discontinued in a R1 district as non-conforming, and so it couldn't move forward with that same use. So ultimately, Dustin purchased the building and took it down, and now is in the process of rezoning to C2. So you can see in the zoning map, there is quite a difference of activities or different types of zoning districts along Lexington Avenue. But recently, we've had a lot of C2 development along Lexington. It is our biggest and most major corridor through DeSoto. So I would see some sorts of changes along these lines to continue. So we do feel like this type of rezoning is appropriate for this area. The other thing about the zoning is the RH, the residential homes, typically back up. There's two Lexington Avenue, so they won't really be affected a lot by any kind of commercial activity. There are two residences on either side of this tract. One is a rental property. The other is owned by the homeowner themselves, and then the C2 is Prudence Meat Market. And then Kill Creek runs behind it, and that's actually RO, but that's the golf course back there for Oak Country. So it is an interesting area, but you can see that it is part of this transition that we talk about. A lot of things happening in DeSoto. There is more interest in different types of facilities. The veterinary clinic opened up. And so there's a lot of activity, especially because, drive-bys and automobile traffic are the drivers of retail and those types of things. So you can see that this would be a prime spot for redevelopment. And that's what is allowed in the business general district. So I went through the zoning compatibility factors, and they really all came up positive as far as staff's opinion. I think a couple of things that really are important to note is the length of time the property remained vacant. There just wasn't a good solution for it as a self-storage unit. The building was old, dilapidated. As I said, several people had made a run at wanting to fix it up, but once we went through the process of saying, well, it's been now over its time, you're gonna have to rezone, you're gonna have to do a site plan, you're gonna have to pave, you're gonna have to do a landscape plan, all those things really kept it from having a use as a self-storage unit. So it was also it was an eyesore in DeSoto, and we're glad it's been removed. Also, Dustin's followed through on several projects as far as turning them into viable commercial activities. I've got no reason to believe there'd be anything different. We have talked about some site plan issues, about some types of uses that could go in here. So there is some momentum to have additional retail types of uses here in DeSoto. I don't see anything detrimental about this rezoning. Like I said, there are two residences on either side, which would impact their lifestyle. I know that the person to the west did call me and actually did come into my office and was asking about it. But they're actually renters, and they were just concerned about, actually more about the safety of having grading activity. They've got some young children. They just want to make sure that there's some protection for them to make sure that there wasn't anything going to happen as far as, filling in the site, clearing the trees, things along those lines. One thing about the environmental issues, that it's along floodplain. They have completed all the studies for filling in the floodplain and making sure that those issues are taken care of. And Joe can comment more on that if you've got some questions for him, because he's handled all those types of issues with this property. But once again, the change of the rezoning won't have any impacts on that. But the site plan process, as you can kind of tell, is moving forward with filling in the site, getting the engineering studies to make sure that there won't be any impacts on floodplains, things like that, into the future. Ultimately, it is consistent with the comprehensive plan. There's utilities on site that can serve this location, and it is part of what we're trying to do in DeSoto, is get more retail opportunities for our citizens here. So with that, I will stand for questions, Mr. Chairman.
I've got one. So why C2? What was the attraction to that? So
Well, as you can see, I mean, that whole corridor is typically, as I
Just remind us the
mentioned,
difference between C1 and C2.
oh, well, C1 is really just focused on our downtown area.
Okay,
And that's really the only area that can go.
okay. So C2 is our general commercial district.
Exactly.
Any other questions for Brad?
And you said the existing building that was there is already demolished?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the old storage building, it's not, the lot that they've been filling in, yeah.
Okay, yep. I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay.
My question, is there any timeline on raising the power lines? Every time I drive by and see that, it bugs me.
Yeah, Dustin Baker, Alcove Development. Yeah, we've been in contact with Evergy. We've talked to them about moving the poles. They're in agreement that they will move the poles. The issue right now is Spectrum is on the line as well. And they would like me to pay quite a bit of money for them to just move the line. So I've been in discussion with them about the adequacy of their request, and we will come to terms at some point in time. We will have the lines moved, and everything will be underground right there along the front of the property. That is our plan.
Thank
I'm
you.
just curious, when I've seen the trucks going in and out, I can watch that line.
Yeah, it's getting pretty close.
It is.
Yeah.
As this is an item for public hearing, I'll open this up for public hearing. Anyone, members of the public that wish to speak on this application, please approach the podium, give us your name and address. Seeing none and no new people online, I'll close the public hearing. The matter's before the planning commission.
I understand that all we're doing is a zoning change right now, but is there, and we are not expected to see a site plan or anything for future use, but do we know what we want to put here or what the plan is?
We do have a quasi plan, and the reason I say quasi is we don't have a user for the particular plan that we have in mind. I can tell you that we are in the process of working on the site plan to submit, and if I was to submit today, then it would be a 10,000 square foot, roughly 10,000 square foot commercial building with parking around the actual structure would be butted up against Lexington Avenue and have parking in the back. So you would see the face of the building along Lexington Avenue. It would be a nice facade to look at, sidewalk running across the front of it, and most of your parking would be in the back. So that's the concept that we're going for, and all I can tell you is if between now and then, if we got a user, things could change, but yeah.
And change, okay. Thank you.
And for the record, the particular use isn't the issue.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's good to know it, but it's not really what we're here for on the rezoning.
Yep.
Plus, I'm really glad you're using the back for parking instead of trying to put a structure back there, because that bank, good luck.
It's impressive. I have my engineer to thank for that.
Okay, any further discussion, questions? Motions?
I'll make a motion that we submit this to approval for the city council for rezoning from R1 to C2.
Second.
Ooh. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Schultz,
Yes.
Maddock,
Yes.
Templin,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Huggins. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Milburn has rejoined us, 6:45. We are now ready for item 7A, consider carriage houses updated development.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you stated, we do have an updated site plan for the carriage houses. This is building number 14. It actually was on the previous submittal. It was probably a couple years ago that they brought in. However, once we talked about floodplain issues and fill permits and all those things, those had not been completed prior to that site plan. So the applicant agreed to pull this building off of the development plan at that time and then proceed with getting the other buildings approved. Those floodplain studies have been completed. Joe's reviewed them, and if you have any questions for that, he is here tonight. Also, representatives from Atlas Engineering are here. They completed the study as well. Andrea, nice seeing you. It's been a while. So anyway, the site plan shows building K. It's also building 14. It's 9,120 square feet. It's single-sided, so most of the building's around 20,000 square feet, but because this is just a single entry or single-sided entry, it's half the size of what we typically have seen. There won't be any public utility improvements on site for the city of DeSoto to manage or take care of. There is only access for utilities will be by electricity with Evergy. So that's pretty straightforward. The architectural design is exactly like what's out there now. I did go out and take a few pictures of the first two on the existing architecture, are the ones that the applicants took care of. I did take some pictures of the addition or the natural vegetation around this building site. As you can see, it's pretty well enclosed by natural vegetation, so we didn't have them do a specific landscape plan. We did talk about and had them do some native grass plantings on that steep bank that goes down to where they've filled. And that is included in the site plan, or it's part of the recommendation that we talked to the applicant about. The houses that are nearby are actually the nearest one's over 300 feet, and it's on the other side of the creek. And really, as you can see, you can't see through the brush and the trees and the natural vegetation. So there really isn't any kind of issues with surrounding neighbors or anything like that. There won't be any right-of-way dedicated to the city. There won't be any easements dedicated to the city. So it's a pretty straightforward site plan. It's not particularly complicated. It was something that was proposed earlier, but because of the floodplain issues and some of the engineering studies that needed to be completed, the applicant did pull it off at that time. As you recall, that building K or building 15 did have the additional restroom, and that's what that open space is there. That's where the lateral field is going. And also on the site plan shows where the additional native grasses will be planted, and there is a seating table that's included in the site plan as well. So with that, I will open it up for any questions you may have for me, Mr. Chairman. But I think it's a pretty straightforward application. This will be the last building or last development plan on site. So I understand it's been 13 years since the carriage houses started, so they are finally nearing completion.
So there's no restrooms in this building
No.
and there's one, 15, is that where it's?
Yeah, there's a public restroom in building 15, and then of course the sort of clubhouse, smaller area that's farther to the west.
What is that green line? Is that the setback line? Is that what that is on the plan there? That heavy green line. I'm having a hard time to see what that is. Oh, there it is right there. Oh, I see what it is. The boundary of area to be excluded.
Yeah.
That's right down in the lower right corner.
Yeah, it's just, the property line actually goes out to the middle of the creek.
So what is the green line?
Sort of the edge of the development itself. It's really, I guess, not really particularly germane to what we're talking about today, but it does show
The fact that this
the
building touches that line isn't an issue, what you're saying.
correct.
Okay.
The bigger issue was, as I pointed out, the floodplain and the fill permit. It is a bit of an anomaly to have the property line running down the middle of the creek, but there are a few properties out in the middle of the Kansas River too that are in DeSoto, so it does happen.
Okay, one last question, then I'll be quiet. Building G, future, is that,
That one actually has been approved on a previous site plan.
okay, perfect.
So yeah, when building K and actually building, I guess 13, 14, and 15 all came in a couple of years ago when we talked about it, and because of the floodplain studies hadn't been completed, the applicant pulled building 14 off the site plan.
Brad, it looks to me like you can't drive around building 14 the way this will be built, right?
No, you won't be able to get access it from the backside.
Does that cause us any concern from a fire protection standpoint or anything? There's people putting cars in there and stuff, right?
Yes, they sure do. I don't know if, I mean, I have not spoke to the fire chief about that. That is something we could certainly
I'd
talk to
certainly
him
like to
about.
know if they have any concerns about it, because I think, unlike the rest of these structures, I'm pretty sure you can get all the way around all the other structures. That would seem worth asking the question.
Brett, I have a question on the state approvals. I know they're all in here, but they're dated 2020, and I know a couple of them said that the work has to be done by July 2024. So are you going to have to resubmit for these, or what?
Ooh, Joe, you'll have to take that one.
Now, they're pretty much done with the work, the grading works. That'd be the permit for the fill.
Okay.
So I think they were done with that, most of it last year. So they should be done with it and be able to certify back to the state that they completed that work.
Okay. I just saw that, and I thought, oh, it's not going to make it. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I, for one, remember what used to be here, and I think this is wonderful.
Me too, yeah. It's a very nice addition. So,
And they can't seem to sell them or build them fast.
I know, it's crazy.
But I would like to see, at least make sure that we've got the fire folks are comfortable with this.
Okay, well, I guess you could put that in your motion as far as when a application to Cameron's put in, that we follow through with the fire marshal and make sure that there isn't any issues not having full access around the backside of the building. Because at this time, we don't know if there's going to be utilities back there. Maybe it's just going to be just a wall and no power, no anything coming in, or any kind of utilities back there, or any reason to be anything flammable maybe back behind the property itself, but we'll certainly follow up with that.
This is not a public hearing item, so the matter is before the planning commission. For questions, comments?
Kind of like you, the only concern I've got is the fire access.
In here.
Is it, I don't know what our codes are on commercial buildings. I assume we have to have a sprinkler system inside the building itself, correct?
Oh, I would guess these aren't sprinkled.
Oh, really?
Well, the occupancy is what really, so as I understand, what drives the sprinkler system. Also, I mean, there's obviously hazardous materials, things like that, if they're selling fireworks. But the occupancy is rather low in these structures.
Yeah, I would doubt any of these are sprinkled.
I don't know, but I doubt it as well.
Yeah, they're not. This is Patrick. And I wonder if maybe you just make a motion to approve the site plan contingent on, input from the fire chief.
I think that's the idea. Okay.
Make a
Thanks,
motion.
Patrick.
Oh, go. Make a motion, we approve the site plan as submitted with Contingency of review from the fire chief review from the fire chief approving the building layout for access, I guess. Sound good?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Templin,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Huggins,
Yes.
Milburn,
Yes.
Maddock,
Yes.
Schultz.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item 7B, consider Carriage House's final plat.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, this is part of the process. The
Just kidding.
plat needs to be approved and filed with the county before building permits can be issued. So once building permits are issued, interior walls come up, there will be a replat of the exact dimensions of each unit within the building itself.
So it's really not the final plat. It's a final plat, but it's final plat. Preliminarily final.
Okay, yeah,
I
exactly.
can't tell you how many plats I've seen of the Carriage House, but I'm with you.
Yeah, precisely. So it's almost kind of like you all know the drill. We will, and we've got our standard language on there, delayed improvements, et cetera, et cetera. As I mentioned in the previous staff presentation, there's no rights of way or anything like that that we're asking from the owner applicant or easements. All utilities will be private, and there really isn't a whole lot for the city involvement other than to do the typical things that we do with final plats and make sure it meets all of our criteria, which it does.
Maybe just a procedural question. Does the applicant want us to approve this if in fact the fire chief comes back and says something has to be different? Or should we wait?
I guess I would assume they would, because they could, I mean, this conversation hopefully with fire chief could be over. We take care of it fairly quickly.
Okay.
If there's a problem, then we'll probably have to come back and,
Just hate to have them to go renotice it, and I guess they probably would have to anyhow, so.
yeah, there's no notification on this. It's
There's
just,
no public hearing.
right.
Okay. Discussion, questions for Brad?
I've got a question. We've got Lot 1 and Tract N here. And I can't tell where one begins and the other ends.
I'll let the surveyor take that one as well.
So lot 1 is the building itself. There's no exterior of it. It's dimensioned there at 3411 there, that square that lot 1 sits in, or the rectangle that lot 1 sits in, that is the lot. Everything else around it within that thicker boundary is the tract.
The center rectangle that says Lot 1, that's the building, and that itself is Lot 1.
Correct, yes.
Everything else, including the part to the west of that, is part
Is
of Tract 10.
Correct.
Okay.
Clear as mud.
So maybe I'm remembering this wrong, but it seemed like on the rezoning, or I'm sorry, on the site plan, that building actually extended out to the proposed floodplain boundary. Which, okay.
I think it just has the same contour.
It's a little confusing, but I think it's right.
Yeah, I see it now.
Yeah.
So I guess there's language on the plat, which I guess there's language for access through Tract M to Lot 1.
There is access throughout the entire thing. So all the tracks are in a, I can't think of the correct wording for it right now,
HOA
but
or
basically,
something.
yes, basically an HOA where it's all cross-access through there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we can look at the, yeah.
Yeah.
Track N shall be owned by individual condominium owners, set up, not maintained by the association. I'm guessing that's where we shoehorn that into the easements or whatever that's reserved for the condo
Correct, yeah, and
association.
covenants and restrictions is what I was trying to come up with, but yes, that is what it is.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, did we get your name for the record?
Andrea Wishup with Atlas Land Consulting.
Thank you. Additional comments, questions, concerns, motions?
Make a motion that we approve the final plat as presented and send forward to city council for acceptance of easements and right-of-way.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Schultz,
Yes.
Maddock,
Yes.
Milburn,
Yes.
Templin,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Huggins.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That completes our agenda. Any additional items to bring before the commission? So, looks like our next planning commission meeting is July 23rd. We take general temperature. Mark's not gonna be here. Who else is gonna be here for the 23rd?
I'll be here.
I am gonna be here. We gonna have enough for quorum?
I think so.
Okay.
Good.
If there are any other business, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
This conference is no longer